Om Ajnanatimirandasya Jnananjanashalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Namam Vishnupadaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharini Nirvisheshai Shunyavadi Paschata Deshatarini Jayo Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, and welcome all the devotees to the level 2 Bhagavadgita classes from ISKCON Mangaluru. So last week we started with chapter 2, right? And then because chapter 2 being one of the biggest chapters, right? So wherein we have 72 shlokas, hence we couldn't complete in 1 week. And then there is a spillover of one class, so which is today. And we'll finish today and we'll pick it up chapter 3 tomorrow. Okay. So until now in chapter 2, right, we saw, I'm just doing a recap because it's been a week's time. So Arjuna had questions, right? So he was bewildered, and then say he was not interested in the fight, and then he put forward his reasons, right? So we know at the end of the chapter 1, and then so he actually surrendered himself to the Lord, right? And then he became a shishya, right? And then he said that Lord Krishna is the guru, and then he said, "You accept me as a disciple," right? And post that, even Krishna chastised him, saying that where have these impurities come in, and then what is the duty of a kshatriya, and then it doesn't befit you, it's non-Aryan stuff, right? And Aryans are those who actually are spiritually connected. And then he starts explaining things, right? So first he starts with the body and soul stuff, right? So wherein he says that we are not the body and we are the soul. So, and then he actually gives a lot of information about the soul, and then why we should not lament for this body, and then what will happen if if his teacher and his grandfather leaves the body, they'll get a new body, and then we should not lament for it, right? And then he slowly says, he actually goes into, first he says fight. So and then he slowly moves him into the karma yoga, right? So wherein he says that enjoy the fruits. So he slowly took into there, and then he said that you should do sakama karma yoga, right? So the thing is, being a kshatriya, you should fight and win the battle. And if you win the battle, you'll get the enjoyment. So you'll enjoy the kingdom, heavenly kingdom on the earth, or else if you lose, then you'll go to the heaven. So, and he stresses his strengths also, saying that Arjuna had a lot of strength, wherein during the exile, right? So he went to different demigods and sages, and then he got equipped with all the celestial weapons, right? And after that, he slowly takes him into Nishkama Karma Yoga, wherein he says that, say, you fight without any desires, right? So that was the bit which we went through last session. And then, so during that portion, right, Lord Krishna says that he actually talks about the steady mindedness, samadhi. Okay. So that topic comes in, and then now from here on, we'll see that Arjuna will actually start asking about what is that samadhi. Okay. So this was the last verse which we left in 2.53. So which says that when your mind is no longer disturbed by the flowery language of the Vedas, and when it remains fixed in trance. So this is what samadhi. Okay. Or the other way is called sthita pragya. Okay. So both refers to the same thing, which is nothing but be in trance of self-realization. Then you'll have attained the divine consciousness. Okay. So anyone know what is this picture about? So who is this person and then who is this? Any guesses? Shubhra Mataji, you know who is this?
Prabhuji, this is Srila Bhakti with Bhakti Srila Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada, and his master,
Yeah,
Saraswati.
yes. So this is um, Srila Prabhupada when he was young, right? So this is one of the pictures which have been drawn. So he happens to be Srila Prabhupada who is taking the initiation from his guru, Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur. Yeah. So here it's been said that we took the graphic example of the Vedas also, right? So the in the Vedas there are a lot of topics which are being described, and so nobody goes through the whole Vedas, and then mostly people get attracted to the sections wherein it gives idea. So it is basically for the atheists to actually come into devotional service. So for them, right? So there are few segments wherein, if at all, if someone does some activity, right, then he gets that benefit. So it's like a give and take responsibility. It's like business with the devatas, right? You actually do some rituals for the sun god, then your health would be good. And then if you do some rituals, then you'll get Lakshmi. Then similarly, there are a lot of things like if you pray Ganesha for 6 months using some mantras and all, and then if you follow the strict principles and all, right? So which is offered in Vedas, then you get that particular result. So these are like for the small kids, right? So when the mother gives him a Cadbury, or so she says that, so you do this particular bit, then I'll give you a chocolate, right? So this is like that only. So it is for attracting for the common mass towards the devotion. But we should not get stuck there. Rather, we should move. And the end of the Vedas is Bhakti Yoga, right? So even that we have a shloka wherein Krishna himself will tell in 15th chapter. Yeah, Vedesha Sarvar Ahamev Vedya. So he'll only tell that I'm the Vedas. Yeah, and then by knowing Veda, you'll know me. So that's the purport, and that's the shloka which we have in. So there we stopped in. So next, Arjuna will ask now to Arjuna, to Krishna, saying that how does a state of prajna walks, talks, and sit? So what are his characteristics, right? So how do we know that someone is in trance or who's in elevated stage in devotional service? So now from here on, right, the verses will have the continuation of Sthita Pragya. So Krishna will actually give in detail. Yeah. So we'll actually read one or two purports also, so which Prabhupada has written in. Okay. So basically, these are the benefits of Bhakti Yoga. Anyhow, so we covered until then, and now so 53 will actually tell us about Samadhi, and then at the end the shloka says how does one go back to Godhead. So these are the five benefits actually. So one is freedom from good and bad reactions of Buddhi Yoga, and then freedom from cycle of birth and death, right? Indifferent to Vedic rituals, which is we just spoke, right? And then relationship of Krishna as an eternal, we are the servitors of Krishna, right? And how do we go back to Godhead? So this is what Sthita Prajna, right? So now Arjuna asks Lord Krishna this question. Arjuna vacha Sthita Prajnas ka bhasha samadhi stasya keshava sthitadhi kim prabhasate kim asite vrajate kim. So he's asking what are the symptoms of one whose consciousness is thus merged in transcendence, yeah? And how does he speak, and and what is his language, how does he sit, how does he walk? So basically he's asking how does one conduct, okay? So being in this material world, right, how does the Sthita Prajna actually conduct himself? So these are the questions which Arjuna asks, okay? And then say we'll actually go through this, okay? So in this verse, right, so he's asking about the symptoms, right? So in the material world also, right, so we can know, right, say it's he says that there is an in the purport it's been given that about the symptom, right? So like a rich man. So if you look in, right, if any rich man comes to any function, or say you go to any function or you go to his home, anything, right? So you can know by the way he lives in, right? So he might be living in some particular localities where he might be having a huge mansion, and then he might be having chauffeur driven cars, right? So all these things, if you look at, right, so you can tell him, you can actually have a fair understanding that okay, so this person is rich. So similarly, so he's asking the symptoms of a devotional person, and even a diseased person also. So if someone is coughing and then who is heavily breathing and all those things, then you can know that this person is not normal, right? And the other thing is, you'll actually in the purport, the next purport, actually Prabhupada tells in this only actually the symptoms of a devotee, right, or a devotional person will be known only when he speaks, okay? So like any famous person or any person, right, looking at his outwardly appearance, right, we cannot judge him, okay? Saying that so someone is tall, handsome, and then has a very good outward dress, right? So it doesn't mean that his mind is also like that, right? Unless he speaks, right? We'll only know by the speech. So speech is the main ingredient wherein you'll know that okay, a person is elevated in Krishna consciousness, or so he's a devotee, right? So and then what does he speak? Okay, so if he's coming and speaking about material enjoyment, sense gratification, and all these things, right? So then there is no point. So he's not an elevated soul. Yeah. So that's the thing, yeah. So and he always actually does the Hari Katha or Krishna Katha, not the Swakatha or Gramya Katha, right? So there is no point of beating our own drum, right? So what use it will have? Nothing, right? It's all only in the material world, right? When we'll have to show off to people, saying that I was here, I went there, for all those things we need our own Swakatha, right? And then nobody is interested in Swakatha. Okay. So the only thing is if somebody is listening, then there should be an obligation wherein either you might have been his boss or you are superior to him in some way or the other, say with monetary stuff or in professional life or somewhere. That's the reason people will entertain your Swakatha, else nobody is interested in the Swakatha. Okay. And if you do Gramakatha also, what will come? cricket and all, if we discuss for hours also, so what benefit are we going to get? Nothing, right? So if he speaks something which is useful, say if he says why we are suffering, so how can we uh, come out of this, right? So all those things should be relevant. So these are the symptoms, and then speech. How does he sit? These are in the next slides, which will come in. Okay. So one of the graphic example would be if you look at Srila Prabhupada, right? So you'll know the symptoms, right? So he'll never speak anything outside spiritual realm, right? Even there were instances. So if you actually in Vani media, right? If you look at Prabhupada memories, right? So you'll see that there are a lot of senior disciples of Prabhupada who actually give their stories, or they share the stories, how they have spent their time with Srila Prabhupada. And then Prabhupada, whenever he used to look something, right? So he used to always dovetail with Krishna. Say, for example, if there are any buses, say, which are going on the road, and then he would appreciate them, like, okay, this bus is very nice. And then the reason he says that the bus is very nice is that the next moment he'll ask his devotees, can we use this bus for Sankirtan movement, right? If he sees any building, any prime location building, he sees that how can we actually make this building into a temple wherein we can engage more people. Yeah. So that's the consciousness which the highly elevated people have in it. So they always think of that. Yeah. So the next verse, okay. Sri Bhagavan Uvacha Prajahati Yad Kaman Sarvan Parthamanogatan Atmani Evatmanatustha Sthita Pragyas Tadochyate. So, the blessed Lord said, O Partha, when a man gives up all varieties of sense desire which arise from mental concoction, and when his mind finds satisfaction in the self alone, then he is said to be in pure transcendental consciousness. So he says that when one gives up all s- varieties of sense desires, which arise from our mental concoction, right? So if you look at um, Prahlad Maharaj, right? So his all his senses were fixed on the Lord, right? So even we'll see the upcoming verses also, right? So he had, when he was being pushed from the cliff, right? So even at that time he had faith in the Lord. Okay. So he was not looking. So at the age of 5 to 10, right? People usually, in general, right? Say the kids, they're more attracted towards playing, right? But at that age, Prahlad Maharaj never played. So he was not interested in all those things. Yeah. So he was more focused on the Lord, right? So this is how, right? So this is an example. So wherein if you look in, right, so the left hand side person is one who is actually materially attached, and the right side, if you see, there is a person who is spiritually attached. Okay. So what happens is, usually the materialistic person always thinks of he is all attached to the four legs, right? How to earn more money and enjoy life, right? So go to clubs, go to cinemas, yeah, and then go and then earn more money. It's all he's always merged, and then he's smoking, gambling, everything, right? So he wants to enjoy to the fullest, and then he's always thinking, how do I engage my senses towards the material engagement, right? So on the other hand, if you look in, right, so there is a person who is spiritually connected, so who is always thinking of Krishna, right? And then how do I satisfy Krishna? Because his thought process is always towards Krishna. Okay, so he is spending his time in doing chanting or worshipping, cleaning, right, or cooking prasad and all those things. So his mind is into that. Okay, so if we give up the left side desires and sense gratification, right, so then only we can move to the transcendental part. Yeah. So general description and characteristics of a self-realized person. Yeah, he gives up all material desires for sense gratification. So that's one thing, right? So one has to leave material attachment. One has to get detached from material stuff, and then one has to get attached to spiritual, okay, things. So these are proportionate things. Okay, so as you leave the material things, right? So on the other side, you will actually gain interest in the spiritual life. Okay, so both will not go in parallel. Okay, see, if you want to sense enjoy, say, like, if you do all sense gratificatory things all the day, and then the next morning if you want to chant and then fix your mind, it's not possible. Yeah. So both will not go hand in hand. So one will become less and the other will one become more. Or yeah. So one does not give them up artificially. So you can't give it artificially. Yeah. So how one finds satisfaction in the self alone? By realizing eternal servitorship to the Supreme Lord. So we should know that, so we are only a part and parcel of the Lord. Okay. And then the Lord is the creator, maintainer, sustainer, right? So he is supreme, right? So we are Anu, and then he is Vibhu, right? So that's the thing. Yeah. So definition of Sitadurmani. Okay. So here again the same thing has been mentioned. Okay. See here, right? Whosoever is in trance, right? He accepts everything. Okay. Happiness, distress as Krishna's mercy. So it's not that. So when there is happiness, right? Say he is joyful, and then when there is sorrow, he is distressed, right? So if at all, if there is anything he's happy about, right? He thanks the Lord, saying that so it's all due to you only, right? So a devotee never takes the credit to himself. If there is any credit which comes in, he passes to the Lord, saying that it is something due to your blessings and mercy, I have got this, and then he actually routes it. So in that way, right? So you'll never get puffed up. Yeah. So the moment you take it to yourself, right, you're gone. So man, pratishtha, these things will come in, wherein you'll feel that wherever I go, so people should actually s- treat me specially. So if at all we have got that uh, thing, that virus into our brain, then so it will lead to us into a destruction. So that's the reason it is always better to offer the credits to the Lord. So in that way, so you are not puffed up, right? On the flip side, if he gets any trouble, right? So he thinks that, so I should have got more. Instead, Krishna is merciful, and then say he had stopped that. Okay, so that's the thing, yeah. So like for example, if somebody met with a small accident, right? So he feels that okay, so this is something has happened due to Krishna's mercy. So either it had have been a bigger accident, so where it could have fractured my leg. Rather, I've got bruises. So that's the thing, yeah. So and then say they doesn't actually get attached to aversion, right? And then they never get angry. So if there are any distractions also, right? So then they'll never get distracted. Okay. So one of the examples is about Haridas Thakur. Okay. So he is one of the best example for the steady mind. Okay. So wherein Haridas Thakur was also called as Namacharya. Okay. So he used to chant lot many rounds in a day. Okay. So he used to chant 3 lakh um, Maha Mantra. So he used to chant 3 lakh times. Okay. So, and he was getting popular in his village because of his steadiness in the devotional service, and so the way he was progressing, right? So uh, then what happened is, so people started coming to him, and then say, and he was getting popular in that village. So there was Ramchandra Khan, so who was actually ruling that province. So he didn't like that. So he said that uh, people should not go there. Rather, they should come to me, and then there should be discussions and all, rather than having the connection with this Haridas Thakur. So what he did is, I'll actually tarnish him. So he hatched a plot wherein he said that I'll make everyone to know that he is a dongi. So by which he is only acting, and then he is not a real yogi, or he's not a real devotee. So what he does is, he actually he actually makes a deal with a prostitute, and then he says that so you'll have to go in the midnight, so into the hermitage of Haridas Thakur, and then you'll have to disturb him. Yeah, and so that was his plan, and you'll have to somehow attract him. And Haridas Thakur, so as per the plan, she goes, and then she says that Haridas Thakur is chanting, and then she says that say, come, let's enjoy. So it's midnight, and these all things she'll tell. But Haridas Thakur will say that I have promised something, so I'll have to finish my rounds. Then I'll actually speak to you. So he says, you wait. So let me finish my rounds, and then I have not completed my rounds yet. And then first day happens again. The sun rises. She goes back. The next day, same thing happens. Even Haridas Thakur says the same story. So today I'll try to finish my rounds, and then we'll chat. We'll discuss. Second day finishes, and then on the third day also she comes in. Same thing. Haridas Thakur says in. But what happens is, while she was waiting, right, she was actually hearing the Harinam from Haridas Thakur, and then he being a pure devotee, right? So he had the power of converting her. So, and then she started chanting on the third day, right? She started chanting, and then she felt at Haridas Thakur's feet, and then she said that, so this was actually a plan which was hatched, and then I'm sorry. So this is it's not a good act which I have done, and then forgive me, and then so hearing this, right, Haridas Thakur actually says that I leave this village. There is no point to be in this village, and then he gives her Harinam Diksha, and then she becomes a devotee. So that's the steady mind. So though there were a lot of aversions for him, right, and then but he was fixed, right. So he was able to control his senses, right. So that's the thing. Yeah. So controlling senses is not easy, and then they are always active. So in the material world, one who is unaffected by whatever good or evil he may obtain, neither praising it nor despising it, is firmly fixed in perfect knowledge. So this is what. the next. Yeah. So this is one more example. Yeah. So wherein so Lord Krishna actually uh, says that how the senses are being utilized. Okay. So for the elevated souls, right? So he gives an example of the tortoise. Okay. So if you have seen the tortoise, right? So uh, you see that if there is any danger which is coming in, right? So then what will it do? It will actually take its limbs and everything, and then it will pack it into that shell. Right? So wherein it becomes so hard that so nobody will be able to identify. Usually, say if they stop moving, right? Say from a distance, nobody will identify that it's a tortoise. So people might think it's just it's just like a rock, right? So and then they'll ignore it. So that's the tortoise, right? Tortoise only opens the hood and then say it opens its limbs outside only when it says sees that it is safe. Okay. So similarly, right? So one has to control his senses and then utilize them only for devotion, right? So for example, going to the temple, right? So there you can utilize all your senses, right? So you can dance, you can chant, you can you can use your senses freely, right? But once you're into this material world, right? So if you start using everything freely, right? So then there is a danger, right? So you like to enjoy everything. So the thing is, the Sthitra Pragya knows when to use the senses, right? He knows the purpose and at what time they should be used. Okay. So he'll not use unnecessary. Okay. Even if he speaks, right? So he'll not, as we spoke a little bit, so some time ago, right? So wherein we said that, say he only speaks when required and speaks, which is perfect in knowledge, right? And then similarly, he doesn't eat whichever is available in the market, right? So he eats sanctified food, right? So the one which is offered to the Lord. Yeah. So in that way, right? So his sense objects will be drawn. So when there are imperfect things around, yeah. So here you see, Sthita Pragya man is fixed in intelligence, right? So he withdraws his senses. And because this even here it's been compared that senses are like the snake, right? So venomous snake, and they can only be controlled with that snake chamber, right? So he actually plays the music, right? To that only. So he's controlling them. So similarly, Sthitapragya controls his senses, right? But if we have objects, if we actually use the objects for different things, then we'll be into a different ball game. Yeah? So now we'll actually read one of the purport. Okay, so I'll need someone to volunteer to read this. So we'll read from Veda Viz, one or two purports, so that we have an habit of reading Srila Prabhupada's book also. Yeah, let me share this. So this is text number 58, right? We'll recite. So this was 59, right? Sorry, so we saw one moment. Yeah, the tortoise ka we finished, correct? Okay, so I'll read the shloka and then somebody can read the translation and purport. Yeah. Vishaya vinivartante niharasya dehina rasavarjam rasopi yasya param drishtva nivartate. Though the embodied soul may be restricted from sense enjoyment, the taste for sense objects remains. But ceasing such engagements by experiencing a higher taste, he is fixed in consciousness. So any Prabhuji or Mataji would like to read this purport?
Prabhuji, shall I read?
Yeah, Mataji, good.
Purport by Srila Bhakti, Srila A.C. Vedant Thakur. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Unless one is transcendently situated, it is not possible to cease from sense enjoyment. The process of restriction from sense enjoyment by rules and regulation is something like restricting a deceased person from certain types of eatables. The patient, however, neither likes such restriction nor loses his taste for eatables. Similarly, sense restriction by some spiritual process like Ashtanga Yoga in the matter of yama, niyama, asana, pranayam, pratyahar, dharana, dhyan, etc. is recommended for less intelligent persons who have no better knowledge. But one who has tasted the beauty of Supreme Lord Krishna in the course of his advancement in Krishna consciousness no longer has a taste for dead material things. Therefore, restrictions are there for the less intelligent neophytes in the spiritual advancement of life. But such restrictions are only good until one actually has a taste for Krishna consciousness. When one is actually Krishna conscious, he automatically loses his taste for pale things.
Hare Krishna. Thank you,
Hare
Mataji.
Krishna.
So here, Prabhupada actually says that so if we are actually artificially stopping something, right? So then that's a problem. Okay. So he may be able to uh, restrict it for some time, but will not lose that taste. Okay. So unless so one is given an higher taste. Okay. So unless one experiences a higher taste, then only we lose the lower taste, right? So the example is given of a diseased person, right? So when someone is patient, right? So during fever or so, right? Then there will be some restriction saying that you should not eat some kind of food, right? But that doesn't mean that he has lost the interest to the food, right? So once he passes, his fever is over, right? So for 3 days, and then he starts again eating those stuff, right? But so that is the condition is like that, okay? So we can't actually restrict our senses, okay? And so with the senses, like in the Ashtanga Yoga, right? So this is all yama, niyama, asana, pranaya, pratyahara, dhara, dhyana. These all things are there. So these are for again the same thing, right? So wherein for the mass to get attracted, and then the actual thing is to get into dhyana of the Lord. Okay. So for the senses, right? The ideal way is we give the higher taste. Okay. So for example, so if we are traveling, right? So if we are traveling on a train for 2 days, okay, and then what happens is if somebody has packed food for us, and from the home they packed prasadam for us for next 2 days. So what happens is first day it's okay, and the second day, right? Slowly, if it is chapati, and then the chapati little becomes a little bit harder for the next day, right? And then say uh, in the afternoon, right? Say while traveling, say in one of the stations, you have your good friend or you have got your god brother, so he actually cooks something and then brings fresh. Okay. And so he says that this is the prasadam, you can have it. So at that time, what we do is we'll actually ignore or we'll leave the chapatis which we bought from home because they have become a little bit harder. And then you're getting a better taste, right? So you're getting freshly cooked food, right? So what you'll do is you'll actually grab that freshly prepared food, and then these things, the food which was cooked from the house, you'll actually lose interest, and then you may give it to someone else also, like beggars or so, right? So that's the thing. So for the senses, we'll have to actually engage them in Lord's service. Then that's the higher taste. Else the senses are very active. They want one thing or the other. So two things, yeah. Senses will either serve Maya or Krishna, but they'll not sit idle. Never ever the senses will sit idle, right? So they'll be serving any one of them. So, okay. The senses are so strong and impetuous, so Arjuna, that they forcibly carry away the mind even of a man of discrimination who is endeavoring to control them. So he says that the senses are very strong, right? So they'll forcefully take. So even if there are great yogis, okay, so whose senses got agitated, okay. So one of the graphic example is of Vishwamitra. So he was actually meditating, and then he was actually controlling his senses, right? And then all of a sudden he heard the ankles of Menaka, and then he got distracted, right? Similarly, we have Sabaramuni. So Sabaramuni was such a elevated soul that say he could actually meditate in the midst of water. Okay, say he was going and meditating in the water. Okay, and then all of a sudden he was attracted with by a fish mating, and then he lost his composure. Yeah? So what we can do is, so you can't actually artificially restrain. So even though they were so elevated souls, and then they were actually trying to meditate, a small distraction actually causes them to actually break their woe and then actually get again into this material entanglement, right? So what we can do is, the solution for this is, so we should engage our senses in such a way that so we have our morning sadhana, right? So we chant, we worship the deities, right? So maybe you read devotional books, right? You cook prasadam, right? You make garlands, you offer garlands, right? So whatever it is there, right? So we actually, or you wash the cloths of the deities, right? So anything which is related to devotional, right? So if we engage there, right? So then we'll not have attractions to these things, yeah. So one who restrains his senses, keeping them under full control and fixes his consciousness upon me, is known as a man of steady intelligence. Okay, so here again, we'll take the example of Durvasa Muni and Ambarish Maharaj. Okay, so it so happens that there is a great sage who is Durvasa Muni, who has got all the siddhis. Okay, so he actually visited Ambarish Maharaj's palace. Okay, and then it happened to be an Ekadashi, so wherein both so the next day it was Dwadashi, and they had to fast their break. And at that time, as the Parana time came in, so Ambarish Maharaj actually consulted with his gurus, and then they said that you can drink, you can sip some water, and then you can break the fast. While at that time, Durvasa Muni said that I'll have to go and then take a bath and come. And then by the time he came, he knew that the king didn't wait for him, and he sipped the water. So he became so agitated that he actually pulled a demon from his hair, and then he actually um, instigated the demon to kill Ambarish Maharaj. Okay. So Ambarish Maharaj is a very pure devotee. Okay. And then he's a Raja Rishi. So though he was a king, so he was a saintly king. So he didn't actually move an inch. So what he did is he started meditating upon the Lord. Okay. And then he used all his limbs for the Lord. Okay. So he was actually using his mouth to recite the slokas, his eyes to look at the beautiful form, his legs to walk towards the temple. So he was actually meditating on all those things, right? His hands for actually garlanding and then all those things, right? So he didn't move an inch. Okay. And then what happened is the Lord is there everywhere, right? So the Lord actually sent his chakra, Sudarshan chakra came in, and then it actually cut the demon into pieces, and then it was actually going after Durvasa Muni to kill him. So Durvasa Muni had to run helter skelter. So he went to all the lokas, right? And then at last he went to Lord Shiva, Lord Vishnu. And then Vishnu said that I can't do much here. So you'll have to go and beg forgiveness from Ambarish Maharaj himself. And then after moving into the three lokas, right? Durvasa Muni comes in and then he asks for the forgiveness. So after Ambarish Maharaj actually forgives him, the Sudarshan Chakra disappears. Okay. So all these are there in Srimad Bhagavatam. Okay. So this is nothing which is concocted. Okay. And even the verse is this one. Okay. This is a very famous verse. Okay. Save mana Krishna Padarvindayor Vachamsi Vaikuntha Gunan Varnena Karor Harer Mandir Marjana Dashu Shrutim Chakrachuta Sat Kadodaye. So these are all there. So if you want, then you can actually get this from Srimad Bhagavatam. Okay. So here, what Amresh Maharaj did. So he fixed his mind on the lotus feet of Krishna, engaged his words in describing about the Lord, hands in cleansing the temple, ears in hearing the pastimes. So that's how he did. Yeah. ध्यायतो विषयान् पुंसा सङ्गस्तेषुपजायते सङ्गात् सञ्जायते कामात् क्रोध अभिजायते. While contemplating the objects of the senses, a person develops attachment for them, and from such attachment, lust develops, and from lust, anger arises. So, this is the sequence which has been given. Okay, say when if we are doing some sense object gratification, right? So then what happens is we get attached to it, and if we don't get them, right? So then we get the lust develops. Okay, and due to the lust, we get the anger. So this is the sequence. And then what happens when we get the anger? Okay. So even that bit is also described in the next verse. Okay. I think looking at the time, we'll go to the deck itself, else we'll not be able to complete. So we were actually looking here. So it's a good habit if you can read through the purports. Okay, so whenever you get time, maybe start with one shloka a day. Yeah. So this is what Ambarish Maharaj. This is what Ambarish Maharaj. And here, if you look, he was the king, and then he is Durvasa Muni who has actually sent one demon to kill him. Yeah. So this is what, while contemplating the objects of the senses, a person develops attachment, and from attachment, if we don't get, then we would like to do. Lust is what? Not following the rules, right? So disobeying the rules and then going apart from it. So and from there, the anger arises. So this is what happens. If senses are engaged in sense gratification, you develop, you will get attachment, and then from attachment, so if you don't get then you'll actually do unethical ways to obtain it, right? And then even if you fail there, you get anger. Yeah. So the next, what happens once we get this, right? Krodhat bhavati sammoha, sammohat smriti vibhrama, smriti bhramshad buddhi nasho, buddhi nashta par pranashati. So what happens is, with krodha, right, from anger you'll get delusion. Okay. And from delusion you lose your memory, you get bewildered. Okay. And then your intelligence is lost, and when your intelligence is lost, one falls down again into this material pool. Okay. So this basically happens with these all the things which are being given. Yeah. Yeah, and then we have this, right? So this is the whole cycle. How do you fall from the objects of senses? You get attachment, then lust develops. We don't get, then anger. From anger, you'll get delusion, and then you lose your memory, intelligence, and then you'll fall down. But a person who is free from all attachment, okay, and aversions, and is able to control his senses through regulative principles of freedom, can obtain the complete mercy of the Lord. So if you look in, right, so what can be done? So it's not that the senses are there and then so we leave it as it is, right? So no, so you'll only have to regulate them, say, right? So for example, say while eating, right? So don't eat everything and anything, right? So possibly you can actually restrict it to what is being offered. Okay, so that's one thing which we can think of, right? And even say if there is any habit of listening songs, right? So maybe instead of hearing the mundane songs, right, we can slowly utilize the time in hearing the bhajans, right? And then say we can hear about the shlokas, or we cultivate the habit of listening to the speeches, right? So in that way, so we are using the senses, but we are regulating it, right? So it's not that we are not doing anything with the senses. The senses are being utilized, but they are regulated and they are being used for better, higher purpose. Yeah. So for one, thus satisfied in Krishna consciousness, the threefold miseries of material existence exist no longer. In such satisfied consciousness, one's intelligence is soon well established. Okay. And one who is not connected with the Supreme can neither have transcendental intelligence nor steady mind, without which there is no possibility of peace. And how can there be any happiness without peace? So that's what you'll get always disturbed. And then the other thing is, one more thing I'd like to tell you is there is something called Yukta Vairagya. Okay. So, like, if you have seen, right? So now take the example of in our class itself, right? I'm using the laptop, right? So, and then you are also using all your smart devices. So we are doing a good thing. So wherein, so we are using the gadgets and everything, but we are using it for a better purpose. So wherein, so we are discussing about Bhagavad Gita, right? So if there is something which we are using for Krishna, then that's good. Okay. And then, so here, the example of a boat is being given. Okay. So wherein they are actually swept away. If there is any strong wind, right, the boat is actually swept away, right? So similarly, the senses are very strong, and then they'll actually pull your mind. Yeah. So here, even if you will read at the purport, right, so one can actually curb the forces of sense gratification only by means of Krishna consciousness or engaging all the senses in transcendental loving service of the Lord. Okay. So this again, you can take the example of tortoise. Yeah. And the example of sadhaka has been given here. Okay. So the sadhaka actually practices because he's at the initial stage and he's practicing the devotional service. So he might not know the nuances of devotional service. So he'll actually take shelter of a bona fide spiritual master. Okay. And then say he will teach us how to actually practice bhakti yoga and then move ahead. Yeah. Yeah, and then this is one of the important verses. Yeah, Ya Nisha Sarva Bhutanam Tashyam Jagrati Samyami Yashyam Jagrati Bhutani Sa Nisha Pashyato Mune. So this is an verse wherein it says that what is night, right, for the materialistic or the sense gratificatory persons, right? That is the day. That is the awakening time for the spiritualist, right? And then what is day for the spiritualist is night for the materialistic. Say, for example, so one example is now if I look the culture in India, right? So if it is a weekend, so from Friday night it starts, right? So majority of the working class people, right? So I'm not saying everyone, but most of them would like to spend night in some pub, some bar, right? And then they'll only come back to home around at 2 or 3, right? And then by the time they sleep, right, the devotee actually gets up. So the devotee gets up in Brahma Muhurta, which is at 4 o'clock, and then he utilizes that time for the spirituality. Yeah. So he attends the Mangal Arati, he does the japa, and then he sets right, and then he listens to Bhagavatam class, and then he goes to work. So that's what is being said here. So what happens to the other person? So other person comes late night, he sleeps all throughout the time. So that's the difference between them. Yeah. So a spiritually enlightened person uses the Brahma Muhurta for actually elevating himself, while the other person uses as a sleeping time. Yeah. So there are two classes of men. So material activities for sense gratification. Yeah. So activities are like day and night. Yeah. So introspective says cultivation of self-realization. So they use that time for that. Yeah. And then how is a materially desireless person? So, right. What happens is we see that there are a lot of rivers which come and actually merge into the ocean. But if you look, the ocean is always calm and steady. So even it doesn't get impacted. Similarly, the self-realized person doesn't get agitated with any of the senses. Yeah, he's always calm and steady because he knows that he is not the proprietor, right? He's not the enjoyer. and he's he has only got a portion to enjoy, and then he remits himself in that quota. Okay. Yeah. So he doesn't have the false proprietorship. Yeah. And then if we actually follow this path, right? So that is the way of the spiritual and godly life. If at all we follow this way, right? Then so we'll be actually going to the spiritual world or the eternal world where we belong. Okay. And at the time of death, right? So one enters the kingdom of God because his senses are always thinking of the Lord, right? And then in the coming chapters, we'll see, right? So what happens at the time of death, right? And how one passes through that phase of life, and then what happens at the time of death, what should be our thinking process and all, right? So even that Krishna tells us. Okay. Hare Krishna. Uh, Thank you for attending this session. So I know that it got stretched up for some time. Yeah, but yeah, so we could complete this. I'd request you all to read. Anyhow, I'll be sending this link of this class, but possibly you can pick Bhagavad Gita and read it. I believe even there will be Bhakti Vikshas which will start. So possibly you'll get some info over there, so where you all can get together and read. Yeah. Shubhra Mataji, any info about that?
Yes, Prabhuji, from we are thinking of starting it from tomorrow onwards,
Okay.
Bhakti Virakshana class. Tomorrow or Sunday, if possible, like we need to decide
Yeah,
all of.
maybe you can decide among yourself, Mataji, and then choose a day or time which fits for everyone. No?
Yes, we have thought of doing it on Sunday and Saturdays. Every means I will just give some information about this class. Bhakti Viriksha class will start, and all of us will in together. We will read the Bhagavad Gita and completely with purport and everything. We all have to do it. To means the objective will be this for this class. So Saturdays and Sundays, 6 to 7 a.m. in the morning.
So Prabhuji and Mataji, this is an forum so wherein you all can come together, and then so Shubhra Mataji, you will coordinate, is it?
Yes, Prabhuji, I will
Uh,
coordinate.
so wherein you all can come together and then read, and then you can exchange your thoughts, right? So it's just uh, to actually um, create an habit of reading. That's it, and then understand, and then it will be easy. So when all of you get together, right, and then you can actually discuss the points, and then if there are anything which you cannot conclude there, then you can come to me. I'll try to explain. Even if there are few things which I am not able to explain, then I'll get in touch with the seniors and then uh, get them answered. Okay, that's the plan. So if there are any questions, I'll take one because we are getting late. If not, we'll wind up. Okay. Uh, Thank you for your association. We'll end this class today. Vancha kalpatarobhyascha kripa sindhubhya eva cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnebhyo namo namo. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Thank you.
Hare Krishna. Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna.
Hare
Thank you.
Krishna.